Fortunately, I'm wearing my only Carry1st blue T-shirt, so
Hey,
if
you
it
gotta
does make it.
keep it keep the branding out there, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. Uh, so the last time we talked was when I guess the whole world was very excited, and I think the one part that stood out for me was how you were excited about having Nas as one of the investors in your raise, right? Remember?
Yes, I do.
Uh, could you just talk to me about what the kind of life and business has been like since then, since the big raise? That was back in what, January?
In January of this year, yeah.
Yeah. What have you guys been up to? What have you been doing with money? Yeah, tell me what it's been like.
It's been a whirlwind, I would say. We announced in January, and there was a ton of excitement and enthusiasm about the raise. I think even we were a little bit surprised about how much people cared, and so having A16Z make their first investment in a company headquartered on the continent, having Google in there, having Nas, it really gave us like a big boost. And so the awesome thing is, I think from a like business development standpoint, and from a partner standpoint, and even recruiting, the fundraise helped us a lot before we even started deploying capital. I would say, beyond that, we've been really focused on growing the business. So, our business is split between publishing games, where we license them from third parties and we also develop them, and then growing our fintech platform where we sell virtual content with using local payment methods. And so, we've spent most of the time really kind of growing the team. We've almost doubled the team. We're at like 55 people now in over 20 countries around the world. We've been adding products and we've been scaling. So our revenues have increased by about 5x from the end of last year. And so there are good things associated with that, but there are also a lot of challenges with scaling. Things break, and there are lots of fires to put out. So it's been exciting.
I mean, that does sound amazing. Like that's a very fast growth as well. Can you give us what the 5x is in absolute values?
We're not sharing that.
Okay. Oh, just like a ballpark picture, so that we have is it, like in the billions, in the millions, is it like, what are we, tens of millions? What are we talking about?
Definitely in the millions, in the high teens millions right now.
Okay. Yeah. So like one thing that wasn't very clear for me when we first talked was what the different parts of the ecosystem that you're in, and it's not just game publishing. You are becoming like a payment platform because you have your store, you're in the NFT space, and like you're using crypto, and that is on top of the solid product that you have, which is publishing games. I think I just saw the other day that one of the games that are published through you was top one in like the president made it to the top of the list. So it's kind of like really big things are happening on a global space.
Yeah.
Can we just start with the publishing aspect of the business and tell me what the problem was, what opportunities there were in Africa, and why Africa was a good place to start this from, and then kind of like let's go and see how quickly you've been able to kind of like have those checks on the Play Store.
100%. So on the publishing side, there were, I would say, two big problems. One is for international content owners, whether studios or publishers, they've had a really hard time scaling and making money in Africa. And the core reason that we found is because one, distribution and marketing and really tailoring the messaging to users on the continent takes a little bit of time and focus and local know-how, and people hadn't really applied that focus yet. But the bigger issue, the reason why they haven't applied focus, is that it's been tough to monetize. And so, on the continent, fewer than 10% of people have an internationally accepted credit card, and that's basically the currency of global content. And so, on that side of the house, when it comes to international content, we act as a one-stop shop, whereby a partner doesn't have to dedicate specific resources to Africa, to understanding the difference between, Hausa and Yoruba, or the difference between, colloquial approaches in Nigeria versus Kenya. We basically act as their go-to-market partner, and we simplify all of that complexity for them. And then obviously on the payment side, which we can talk a little bit more about, we allow folks on the continent to be able to pay for international content using methods that are available to them, like mobile money, like local bank transfer, like local random card schemes that people have never heard of. And so, the first piece is helping international content scale in the region where there's a massive opportunity, 1.4 billion people and amazing demographics and tons of growth. The other side, which when you talk about the president, is local game developers in Africa haven't really yet broken out and had international success. And I would say the president and Mikan Games is the first, and it happened with like extraordinary success, right? So we launched an incubator late last year called Crazy Hubs, in partnership with one of the biggest publishers in the world, which is called Crazy Labs. They have over 4 billion downloads in their history, so pretty awesome company. And the idea was, could we work with local game developers on the continent who had, talent, who had aspirations to do this for a living, but had never really made any money or had commercial success? Could we bring them to one place? Carry1st would host them, and then Crazy Labs would provide them with training and guidance as to how to make commercially successful hyper-casual games. And so we ran our first cohort in November for 4 months, 20 members. We fed, clothed, housed them for 4 months, and tried to teach them how to make games. And it's really, really, really tough to make a commercially successful game. And I think it's amazing that in our first cohort, we had a team from Kenya that had a game that not only became successful, but became the #1 downloaded game in the United States, which is the biggest, most competitive, most like badass market that exists. The idea that a couple guys from Nairobi would be crushing it in the States after graduating from our incubator is amazing. So we're super excited about that. We want to continue that program. And I would say, honestly, it was unexpected, but it just shows what kind of latent talent is here that just isn't being tapped.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I guess is clear across board, not just in the gaming space, but across board, is there's a lot of talent on the continent, and anybody who's able to be that connector, or in your case, be a publisher, of bringing in these guys who can make games and get them to the market. That is such a niche and needed service that you're providing in the gaming space that I keep seeing in other payments or education or whatever it is spaces as well. Or is that a good read of what you're trying to do, like take this talent that we have on the continent and value add more or less? right?
Yeah, it is. That's part of our value proposition. I think you said it well. We're looking to be the bridge between Africa and the world. And it goes in two directions. I think folks on the continent want to engage with the best games and the best media in the world. And so we help people essentially, get that content into their hands. But on the other side, as you mentioned, there is so much talent on the continent that is untapped. And we do try and be a bridge in the other direction, sort of connecting local developers on a global basis. Now, originally as a pure play publisher, something like Crazy Hubs would never be in your remit, because what you typically will do is you go find folks who either have a great game or are very close to having a great game. And what you provide is potentially some capital to help them finish it, a little bit of guidance as far as what you think will work in the market. And then ultimately you're the business arm, right? You're acquiring users, you're live operating the game, you're monetizing. And so we have a partnership like that on the continent with a studio called Kene Games. But what we found was there aren't many Kene games on the continent. So you don't have thousands and thousands of kind of ready-made professional studios where you can just go to them and say, give me your game, I'll go and I'll publish it for you. And so something like Crazy Hubs is actually helping to cultivate, to develop the talent pool so that there will be in 6 months, a year, 5 years, a big, vibrant, professional studio ecosystem in Africa. There's a big difference between making a game that's fun and making a game that makes money, right? A game that's fun is a toy, and a game that's fun and retentive and people are willing to either spend or watch ads to play, that's an enterprise. And enterprises, I think, is what we need for folks moving forward.
Nice. That is very interesting, and you bring up a few things that raised a few questions on me for me. And one is kind of like first question I asked you about, like your revenues. But what kind of models do you have when you are thinking about who to bring into your next cohort or who to partner with? What kind of games are you thinking? I mean, I'm assuming it's a lot of mobile games now that makes sense for, especially at least for the kind of world we're in. Or are you also doing console games or PC games? So in that space, as well as what kind of like relationship do you have with when you bring in a cohort to come and train with you and go ahead and build a game that becomes financially profitable? What kind of deals that do you make with the different partners that you work with?
Yeah, our focus today is almost 100% mobile. It's the fastest growing and now the largest part of the ecosystem, even on a global basis. So it's about $100 billion industry out of a couple $100 billion industry total. And importantly, mobile democratizes access to games, right? You don't have to buy a console, which costs $800 or $900. You don't have to buy a gaming PC, which costs a few $1,000s. You can use something which you already had in your pocket, which you were going to have anyway, so that you can, chat with your friends and go on dating apps. And you can access games which are free to play. And so it took gaming from something which was almost entirely Western, upper middle class, oftentimes male dominated, and just like democratized it. So now, mobile games are equally distributed, male, female, actually slightly skewed towards female.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing that surprises people. The majority of mobile gamers and payers are female, It's evenly distributed across age groups. So I used to say when I was pitching that the median mobile gamer is a 40-year-old woman, right? Which would surprise people because they're thinking about, a
Yeah.
sweaty 17-year-old in like his parents' basement playing games all day. So mobile has like fully democratized gaming. And the big thing for us is it makes it accessible in frontier markets like Africa, whereby the barrier to sort of access is much lower. So that's the main reason why we're focused on mobile. There's a little bit of an opportunity, we believe, when it comes to publishing, helping with community payments, and just activation around PC and console games. So there are some international partners that we are speaking with and potentially will work with to help them with community on the continent. But I would say mobile is the primary means, is sort of our primary channel today. And then when you think about commercial arrangements, the thing that I love about the gaming industry and the way it's developed is it tends to be kind of win-win partnerships, and so the way we tend to look at things is on a what we call revenue share, but actually is closer to like a profit share. And so it varies depending on who the partners are and what the game is, and what the markets are. But the idea is if a game makes more money, we all make more money. And if it makes less, we all make less. So we're all incentivized to build awesome games, to acquire as many users as possible, and to give them as good an experience so that they're willing to spend money or watch ads.
Interesting. I mean, this is partly a lot of like new like frontier knowledge for me as well. So it's if I'm asking you questions that are very basic, think putting that out ahead. In terms of the size of the market itself, I think you put up a report some point last year that Africa was I'll let you tell me the figures, but how big is the market when it comes to the value, and then in terms of numbers of developers that are working on games, specifically mobile games on the continent? What's the size of that? And then kind of like the president was huge in the US, but what are the other markets? Is there a huge market in Europe for some games, in Asia? Are we able to penetrate Chinese games as well? How is that looking like?
Yeah. So when you think about the market for game developers on the continent, it's actually currently there really is no official data, but I would say it's really, really small. I would estimate there are probably fewer than 100 studios that are making games for a living on the continent. And the reason why I believe is because you just don't have many examples of folks who have done it successfully, like the president with Mikan Games, and made money and that kind of thing. And so if you don't have any examples of folks that are doing it commercially, you don't tend to get the best developers necessarily that are focused. So we have tons of brilliant engineers, artists, animators, but my guess is they're all working for fintech companies right now. And only the people who are like obsessed with games are like, I'm going to quit my job and make games for a living. Now, making games for a living is a great endeavor. And I think that will change over time as people see examples like the president and say, okay, not only is this something that I love and that's fun, but I can actually make money doing it, and build a business and make a life for myself and my family. So I would posit that there are fewer than 100 like commercial studios on the continent. When it comes to the consumer market, the official data, which we put out last year with Newzoo, says that we've cleared over 300 million gamers. and that we cleared just over $1 billion of total revenues in the industry. My sense is that the revenue
This is the global numbers, or
oh no, that's in Africa.
so 300 million in Africa?
Gamers in Africa, yeah.
Okay, including mobile games. Okay.
Exactly. So those are unique gamers. So number of folks who are playing games. It's actually just about 300 total. And so that's a big market when you think about it. There are only 300 million people in the United States total, right? And as mobile penetration continues to increase, and as people make games and market to users on the continent, this could be very easily a 600 or 700 million gamer economy or market. Typically, 2/3 of smartphone users are playing games, right? So if you think at some point there will be nearly 100% smartphone penetration, and those figures hold up, we'll have 1 billion gamers on the continent, right? Like it's not infeasible. And the revenues, interestingly, grew over 7x in a 10-year period. And I honestly think that they're probably understated. What I find when I travel, like we were just in Lagos with our team a few weeks ago, is that there are a lot of people that are finding workarounds to try and pay for content. They're VPNing to a different country and getting a USD card so that they can buy, a PlayStation subscription. They're importing, PS5s from Dubai and then selling them locally. There's a huge gray market, I believe, whereby folks are finding workarounds to be able to play the games, engage with the content that they want, and get around just sort of the restrictions that exist in our ecosystem. So, 1 billion is the official number, and I think it's probably much larger.
Speaking of how creative people are on the continent, someone was telling us how they would use their cards to sign up for, say, YouTube Premium for a month just to get the free access or the 3-month free access, and then just, cancel the card because the card costs less than the subscription itself, and then repeat and rinse. And that, I guess, is a good transition into the other conversation of payments that you're also working on, and the crypto space and the Web3 products that you are integrating, because I guess it's an obvious transition when you talk about gaming and the metaverses. It seems like where we're headed. Can you just also talk to me about what you're thinking about in that space and what you're actually doing right now?
Absolutely. So we have a e-commerce website which basically sells virtual goods. The concept is called a top-up shop. We borrowed it from Southeast Asia and China, and it's a place where people can go and buy digital content using a wide range of payment methods. And so our shop, which is called the Carry1st shop, it has things from what we call like basic utilities, which would be airtime, data, prepaid electricity, to entertainment products. We have a direct integration with Tinder, for example, so you can top up your dating app subscriptions. And then finally, and most importantly, we have a really wide range of in-game content. And so what it allows for is people who maybe aren't able to make an in-app purchase because they don't have a relevant payment method or whatever other reason, to be able to make a purchase of in-game items, whether it's through a voucher or an automatic top-up, and basically get back to playing games. So very simply, we have a digital marketplace which allows people to use local payment methods to buy whatever they want. And our view is that today that may be a relatively small share of a user's wallet, but that it's definitely growing, and that over time it will be the sort of dominant means. As more of your time and your social life and your entertainment moves online, you're going to spend more and more of your money on digital and virtual items as opposed to physical items, t-shirts, and whatever else you purchase on a traditional e-commerce website. So that's a Carry1st shop, and underlying that is a payments aggregation engine which we've built, where we're integrated with now over 20 different gateways that opens up over 90 different payment methods for users across Africa. And one of the things that we thought about is, well, look, if we're enabling things like mobile money or local bank transfer or agents, why not enable crypto at point of sale, right? Users on the continent are already adopting crypto at higher rates than almost anywhere in the world. There's a report which says that 5 of the top 20 countries in the world with regard to peer-to-peer crypto payments are in Africa. And so people on the continent are adopting Web3 to handle like traditional legitimate use cases in their life beyond like speculation and hoping that like Bitcoin triples in price. And so, we want to make that available and accessible for our users when it comes to, buying digital content as well. So we're integrated with partners that allow us to accept crypto at point of sale. And we're, very, very bullish on the space.
I mean, one thing that comes up whenever we talk about especially payments and crypto specifically is the question of regulation. Many regulators on the continent, obviously, are trying to keep all the dollars within their borders, or they do not want you to be having, to some extent, this cross-border payment systems, especially in crypto. So how are you dealing with that question of regulation? Do you have to deal with the different country-based regulators, or the fact that you have a partnership with someone else who already has that kind of takes you away from that conversation? But also on the shop itself, is it just you who's creating the content and selling it, or are you also like allowing a peer-to-peer kind of trading to occur on your system?
With regard to regulation, our general approach is to stay as far away from regulated industries, regulated products, and regulators, broadly speaking, for a number of reasons, but mainly because we want to focus on consumers and figuring out how to solve their problems. So when it comes to payment partnerships, we tend to work through a gateway or an underlying service provider that takes care of that heavy lifting for us and maintains compliance. So our general approach is stay away and stay close to the consumer when it comes to that, as opposed to regulators.
So who are some of the gateways that you're working with in the different markets?
Yeah, so there some of your regional folks that you would have heard of, your Paystacks and Flutterwaves and Cellulents of the world. Some international ones, we have a direct integration with MasterCard payment gateway services, PayPal, and the list goes on. So our idea is really to not duplicate the good work and the hard work that all of these payment service providers have done, integrating directly with telcos and banks and doing a lot of work with security and regulation, but just to work with them and be basically like a super merchant. So again, like we want to be in situations where everyone wins. Our consumers get access to products they want. our payment providers get more transactions and more flows and more fees, and ultimately we grow the market and take our share of the pie.
Okay. And then on the market, the peer-to-peer potential market.
Today, it's only sort of us providing products. There's a two-sided element to it, because we've just started allowing third-party games to list their products directly in our shop. And so, historically, we would only list games where we're directly licensing the game. We're the go-to-market arm in Africa. But we realized that, when we spoke to a lot of different studios, they would say, I'm not sure if we're ready to publish in Africa, but can we use your payments platform? Right? They'd say, like, we have all these users that are showing up. We have all these daily active users, but they're not monetizing. Can we, could we just use your payments or use your shop? And we'd be like, no, we're a publisher. We want it all. And at some point we realized that, you kind of have to push them the way they lean, if that makes sense. And if the current approach is, people want to take a first step, which is to prove to themselves that folks on the continent are willing to pay for their in-game items and pay for their content, that we should do that. So it is, it's two-sided in that there's third-party content, but it's not peer-to-peer yet.
Okay. How many games do you have published already, and what you're able to kind of forecast what we may expect, say, in the next 2, 3 years, 5 years?
That's a good question on the forecast. So our publishing approach is, I would say, narrow and deep. So each partnership that we work with is, there's a technical element. We do a lot of work on the game, and we pour usually a lot of dollars into user acquisition to grow the game and try and drive as much revenues as possible. So my view is that at peak, when we're a $100 billion company, we would have no more than 10 to 12 active games at any one point in time. Now, we'll probably have tested hundreds and released dozens, but the idea is to have a few really high quality games which cover all the demographics, young folks, older folks, competitive gamers, more casual gamers, and really grow those franchises. So today we have 3 games live. We have 7 licensed, which are at various stages of soft launch. And I would project that we'd release another maybe 3 to 4 games next year. The one interesting thing is we've just started developing our own games again. That's how the company started in the very early days. We expanded to a third-party publishing model, and now we're getting started in game development again. So that may add some more titles to the portfolio.
Why do you decide to go back to the original plan?
Well, I would say it's supplementing. The reason why is we in testing hundreds and hundreds of games, we realized that there's a gap in the market. That I would say AAA game developers or Western game developers are building games which are really, really well suited to Western audiences, and particularly from a technical standpoint, games that work on very high-end smartphones with tons of storage and tons of processing capacity, and that actually a lot of users in our region kind of physically, technically cannot enjoy those games, right? They're using a lower end smartphone. They have intermittent connectivity. A lot of people play games on their commute. If you think about the commute in and out of Nairobi or across Third Mainland Bridge in Lagos. You might be on a 4G connection, then a 3, then you might have no connection, and then it might pop back, but you only have 2G, right? And if you're trying to play a game that requires like pristine connectivity, where a few milliseconds of latency or delay will cause you to lose, you just can't really enjoy those games. And so we're building games that are fun to play, but that are going to be a lot more accessible for folks in frontier markets. That's the idea.
I mean, I'm thinking you are an African-based publisher or all-encompassing gaming company, but you're not just an African company, right? It is a global company because you're going to try and market to the US and have whatever it is, Asia and everybody else. So how does your presence being in Africa give you a competitive advantage to tap that market? Also, what disadvantages does it come with? I'm thinking this because of other conversations I've had with other like fintech-based companies that have African developers who are relatively cheaper, but of the same quality, or if not even better sometimes in Nigeria, and they're able to do the jobs that anybody can do.
I think being headquartered on the continent provides some benefits. I think from a talent standpoint, we do have, I would say, differential access to talent. We're a fully remote company, so we have folks in over 20 different countries, including parts of Europe and the US. And so it allows us to recruit the best and brightest from wherever they are. But we do have, I would say, deep insights and networks in places like Lagos, like Nairobi, like Cape Town, where you do have young folks who are incredibly talented, who might not have access to a global job market. And so, or you have access to folks maybe in the diaspora who are from the continent, but left. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, people of African descent who might be living in the US or Europe have some tie back and maybe a desire to be impactful in the region or to serve users on the continent, but haven't had the opportunity to, because they ultimately took the opportunity to go and maybe study at a great school in the US, or get their first job at a major tech company. So we really feel like we have the ability to recruit from anywhere across the globe. So talent is one thing where we feel like we have an advantage, but the other benefit is just having like a home court advantage. There is a region where we know more than anyone else. We have more relationships, and we have sort of differential expertise. And so, we feel like there's a massive benefit to that. And some of the biggest and most powerful gaming companies in the world pivot on that, right? If you look at Tencent, if you look at Sea, they are able to kind of dominate their home base and then, compete on a global basis. And so that's what we hope we'll be able to do.
Yeah. I mean, and again, at this point, you have more or less put the continent on the map when it comes to game publishing. Obviously, there are other smaller players on the continent who will benefit, I guess, from your at least name being out there. I don't want to call it dominance. So it's at least the social proof has already happened, and now it's a matter of, I guess, maturing and see how that goes into the future. I think I asked about the metaverse since usually the porn industry and the gaming industry are always at the cutting edge of these things.
Yes.
And you have to be one of those two. So what are you doing? What are you experimenting with in like in that space, not just, you know, making skins for games, but are you doing anything more than that? Or what should we expect from any of the things you publish?
Yeah, so I think there's a really important nomenclature distinction to make. I think there are, I would say, two very hot streams of gaming right now. One is crypto gaming, play to earn, play and earn, and the other is what people have termed kind of the metaverse broadly defined. They're related but distinct, right? So crypto and Web3 allows for genuine ownership of digital assets. So, you know, in a game, if you buy a skin or earn currency, you actually own it. You can transfer it to someone else on a blockchain. You can sell it and make money. You can save it and give it to your kids, you know, when you die or whatever. And I think that will help enable the metaverse, right? But the metaverse is slightly different, or it's very different, right? The metaverse is essentially a fully immersive, persistent, like spatial reality in a digital world. And so I would say today, we're not particularly active in thinking about things with regard to the metaverse. Typically, it requires pretty high-end equipment, AR, VR equipment, requires like a ton of infrastructure when it comes to connectivity and real-time communications. And so our view is that I think the West will probably lead on that for a while, and at some point when it's been cracked, and then people start thinking about, well, how do we make the metaverse more accessible or more sustainable, or you know, whatever. Then I think it will be interesting for us and folks across the global South. Now, Web3 gaming is actually in many ways the opposite. I think Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America are actually tier one markets when it comes to Web3 gaming, because fundamentally what it allows is for folks who have more time, intelligence, ingenuity, and energy than money to be able to actually leverage all of their skills and their energy and to earn and own assets that have real value. So play to earn or play and earn gaming, to the extent it takes off, I think is gonna really have its home base in the global South, in frontier markets. And if you've seen the examples that have taken off, they've tended to take off in places like Southeast Asia. And so we're pretty excited about it. Again, we're a publisher primarily. And so we start with, you know, can we find awesome content? And then what do we do with it? And I think the industry is still somewhere in the process of making awesome content that has Web3 associated with it. And as that develops, we're going to be right there helping to publish it in the region. We're working on some things in the like payments and commerce space that's related to Web3 games that we think will help folks be able to on-ramp and engage those games. But ultimately, people have to make great Web3 games, right? Just because it's has crypto in it doesn't mean it's going to be fun. Games have to engage people for a long time, and games are entirely discretionary. That's like the beautiful thing about it. If you get bored with a game, you'll just put it down, right? And so we have to start with fun first, and then I think there are tons and tons of positive implications with Web3 gaming for our users and a wide range of folks.
Yeah, I think you did answer that question when I asked you if you're doing mobile games, and you said 100%. And I guess, you know, we're not doing metaverse on your phone necessarily.
Not yet.
Not yet, at least. Yeah. I also on this, you know, the fun games that are coming out of potentially the continent. Where are you, you know, looking and getting excited about some of the development that is coming from the African region? Who are making some of the fun games?
Look, it's still a small industry, I would say there, and it's concentrated in a few centers for the most part. There's Nairobi, there's Lagos, there's a bit in Cape Town, and then you have a couple folks who pop up in you know, Ghana and Cameroon, etc. I would say, you know, some people that come to mind, obviously Mikan Games, the folks who made the president, are now off and running, and I see they're growing their team, and I imagine there's going to be some really awesome content that comes out of that team over time. Kene Games in Ethiopia, I had mentioned before. You know, they have, I would say, produced multiple international quality games, and are looking to continue to develop awesome content, and I have a lot of faith in them because I've worked with them very closely. And then there are a handful of other folks who I think have released some games that maybe haven't yet cracked the code, but that are talented and that are working on interesting ideas and concepts. So we're kind of constantly watching the space and trying to be helpful to the extent that we can be, and people want to work with us.
Nice. And you know, to anyone who doesn't know your background, can you just tell us, like, where in West Africa you were from, how you ended up in the US, and how you came back? Just generally a full circle story of Cordell.
Cordell's mini bio. Yeah, so I'm from Sierra Leone, which is a small, and I would say kind of hard luck country. I left in '92 during the kind of second year of a 10-year civil war, and moved to the States. Lived in the States for 20 years, went to Stanford undergrad. I was very fortunate to have ended up there, having, you know, left essentially a war-torn country. So from the time that I became really aware of that in college, always had a dream of, at some point, kind of like deploying my skills and talent and good fortune back in the region. I started my career in investment banking. I spent 3 years with Morgan Stanley in New York and London. I then became a private equity investor with the Carlyle Group, worked closely with one of the founders for a couple of years in DC. And then they were launching an Africa-focused fund, and I raised my hand to join. So we raised about $700 million. I moved to Lagos, Nigeria in 2013, and I spent the next 5 years basically traveling all over the region, investing in companies across industries. That was amazing. Kind of like a reintroduction and a kind of induction into life on the continent and business in different countries. I traveled all over. And while I was doing that, I started investing in tech startups on the side. Me and a Stanford buddy raised like a micro fund, about $1 million, and started cutting angel checks into African startups. And so that was what eventually...
what year was that?
We started in 2016, I want to say. So first 2 deals, so pre-fund, a couple deals that he had done. He had invested in Flutterwave, in Andela. So it was that wave. And then the first couple deals that we did together were Paystack, which obviously got acquired by Stripe, and then a company called Max, which has gone on to do well and raise a couple rounds of financing. So in many ways, we kind of we kind of started at the perfect time. We hit like the golden age
But
of.
how do you guys have that eye for like 4 out of 4? Well, at least the ones you mentioned.
Well, I think part of it is just being on the ground. I was living in Lagos. He was in New York and well connected. There weren't that many folks that were launching startups at the time, and so it was really, you got to see everything. If you were a funder, and you can just tell, smart guys who have gone to great schools, whether on the continent or internationally, working on a big problem, and it doesn't. There's a bit of luck and a bit of timing as well.
Yeah. Can I actually ask on that, because at least the 3 companies have gone kind of like in 3 different directions. Andela, has become this global company, and then Paystack is at least now private, and then Flutterwave wants to do IPO but is having drama right now. What what do you make of that? Like, why do you think different things happen? I mean, I'm more interested in the Flutterwave now because it's the most current conversation in our space. But having seen it from early days,
and it's a juicy story right now at the moment. Yeah. Honestly, I think this is just very, very natural. If you were to ask me when I started my company, what would be the most ideal outcome, I would say, look, I would be happy to get acquired a few years later by a major, international player from Asia. I would be happy to continue to raise venture capital and grow and be a unicorn and see what happens. Or, I would be happy to IPO in the NYSE or the NASDAQ and get liquidity and, continue to run it. Like, there are, when you start a company or when you invest in a company, there's a lot of different ways it can go, and there are different models of success, depending on how long you want to be doing it, depending on what your ceiling is as a company. And so I see those 3 examples and they don't raise an eyebrow for me, right? Like I've invested in so many companies professionally that you figure out what's right for you, what's right for your founders, and what's right for your investors. And so I would be happy with any of those outcomes as long as they're big.
Perfect. Last question, anything else you have to add? Or
nope,
just
nothing?
Nope. Okay. Right on time.
Awesome.
Thanks, Cordell.
Hopefully that was there's some interesting things in there.